Hello and welcome to Cupcakes and Crafts. Today I'll be showing you how easy it actually is to make this beautiful mermaid tail cake. You'll need a sharp knife, a cake knife, a cake. I'm using 3 layers. I've got some buttercream, a cake board with some double-sided sticky tape and some ribbon, which is the same width as my board, along with some white fondant. I couldn't make my mind up what I wanted to use for the tail fins, so I've got an assortment of cutters and an ice cream cone, which we'll come back to in a little bit. I'm not too worried that my ice cream cone isn't flat. I kind of like the idea that it'll be going up on a slant. I've got a scraping tool, but if you don't own one, don't worry, you can always use a cocktail stick, which I've got a couple to use, along with some blue food colouring. I've got a fondant rolling pin, some white chocolate, which is just to melt. I've also got some sheets of baking paper, a piping bag or a food bag, whichever you've got available. I've also got some Milky Way stars. I've got a shell mould. If you haven't got a shell mould, don't worry. I was looking for a box of Belgium chocolate seashells to use because they've got an assortment of the shells, but the only ones I could find are these seahorse ones. I've also got some scissors, some edible silver balls, and then I found these Wilton rock candies, which I thought would look really good, and these were only from Home Bargains actually. I've got some blue luster dust, some white luster dust, and some gold luster dust with a soft paint brush. You also need a butter knife and then a straw or a lollipop stick or a kebab skewer. And the first thing we're going to do is make that tail because we want it to have time to set and harden that fondant. So taking the luster dust, you want to get a really good coating. And if you haven't got any luster dust in or available to hand, you can always buy the luster dust food spray, which would work really well and give everything a really good cover. I then decided to go over mine in a little bit of the blue, just to get a little bit of a two-tone effect, which I thought would look really nice. So I'm just working that blue luster dust into the brush bristles and then rubbing it over ice cream cone. You then want to just leave that to the side while we work on our fondant. So just rolling it out nice and thin. That's how thin I've rolled mine to. And then taking the assortment cutters or whatever you've got available. If you haven't got any, you can always just draw your own template and then cut that out as well. I couldn't make my mind up which one I wanted to use, so I just held them up against my tail and had a little look at which one I preferred, and I couldn't make my mind up between these two. I ended up going for the leaf cutter in the end. You just want to push it down into your fondant, remove the excess fondant, and then using your scraping tool or your cocktail stick just to engrave some lines and give it a little bit of detail so it looks a little bit more realistic. And then I'm going to cover these in luster dust, the exact same as I did with the tail, starting with the white and then going over it in the blue. And again, if you haven't got these and you've only got the spray, just spray them. And then I'm going to take a little bit of that white chocolate and melt it. I'm just placing my scraping tool inside the ice cream cone so it doesn't roll away while I'm working on the end of the tail. I'm then going to place a small amount to the side and the centre of the tail using the cocktail stick and gently attach the fin I've just made, having it in the centre and over the side of the tail and gently pushing it down onto that melted white chocolate, and then repeat the exact same on the other side. And you can see I've worked quite closely to the tip of the ice cream cone. Then taking that cocktail stick, I just quickly neatened up any of that white chocolate what had come down onto ice cream cone. I then went back over the tip of the cone with the blue luster dust because the fins looked a little bit too blue compared to the rest of it. The next thing we're going to do when you've set your tail aside to dry is take away 2/3 of our buttercream and dye the remaining third of it blue, just using as food colouring. And then it's time to prepare our cake board. So rolling out our white fondant until it's a similar size to your cake board. You want to then just gently place it on top. I didn't use any water because I didn't need any, but if you do need to stick it, you can use a little bit of water. Then I just used the rolling pin to stretch it out, smoothed it off with my hands, and then taking that sharp knife, I just cut away that excess from around the edge. To apply that ribbon onto your cake board, you want to put some double-sided sticky tape onto the edge of your cake board. I just did mine at opposite sides and used 4 pieces. Then I removed the backing, and then to first place your ribbon on, you want to pick one of your segments of double-sided sticky tape. Halfway into it, that's where you want to place your first piece of ribbon. Wrap your ribbon all the way around the edge, come back to the back, cut your ribbon, and you're finished. So I definitely filmed this next part backwards, but if you do have a mould, to remove your fondant, I like to keep mine in freezer so it goes nice and hard. Gently pull away at the sides, and then with a gentle push from the back, they should just ping straight out. And to fill your mould, which I should have done in the first place, you just want to gently push all that fondant into every crevice, making sure you're picking up all them details. And then with a sharp knife, just cut over the top, removing any excess fondant. And then keep it in freezer. Well, I like to keep mine in freezer. You can just work straight away and pull your fondant out now, but I prefer to put mine in freezer, it just comes out easier. And then let your moulds dry on some baking paper, and then the exact same way as we did with the tail, I just covered all mine in different colour luster dusts. Now we've got everything made and sorted and prepared to go on top of this cake, we're going to prepare this cake. I like to remove all the caramelisation off mine from the top and the bottom, and eventually I will do the sides as well, but I like to stack my cake before I work on the sides. I'm going to fill mine with blue buttercream because we don't need to use as much of that on the outside. So I'm just going to work my way up to the edge, trying to not get too much over because I do want to remove that caramelisation from the sides. And then on again with another layer, and the exact same, filling that too, just covering it all the way to the edge, placing on the top, and then I put this in the freezer for about 15 minutes just so it went nice and firm. And then as you can see, just cutting ever so slightly that caramelisation off, and working my way around, all the way around the sides. And then using that white buttercream, I'm going to give it all a crumb coat. So basically just covering the entire cake in a really thin layer of your buttercream. And then let that chill and harden. And then placing another layer of buttercream, but a little bit thicker this time, and you don't have to worry too much about getting this layer neat because we are going to come back in and apply some of that blue. As you can see, I am applying it generously. It just makes it a little bit easier to get it level, and then just neatening up the sides and giving it a quick tidy round before I put it back into the fridge to chill again. When we've let that cake have about 15-20 minutes in the fridge, it's time to put everything together. So starting with your cake board, we're going to place a small amount of buttercream to it and then place on that cake. And we do that just to make the cake a little bit more secure on that cake board. And then now taking some of that buttercream, I'm going to place it randomly on the sides of the cake. I'm not going to put any blue on the top, I only want blue on the sides if I can help it. And then I'm just going to randomly place that on the sides as well. And then I'm just going to work on now making it be as neat as possible. Just scraping it off, removing all that excess. When it comes to neatening the sides, the more you scrape off, the more that white will come through. So if you want it very blue, then be more generous with the blue. If you want it very two-tony, then keep going until you see that white coming through as well. Just keep going until you find a point where you're happy with how the cake looks. And I also made a bit of a mess on my cake board, so I'm just using my spatula or a butter knife just to clear that up. And with the remaining blue and white buttercream, I'm going to quickly mix them together and place them in a food bag or piping bag and cut a small amount of the corner off. And then taking a lollipop stick or a straw, kebab skewer, whatever you've got available, this will just give his tail a little bit more support when it's on the top of the cake. Using the actual tail, I made a mark on the cake where I thought it would look nice, took the tail off, placed a ring of the buttercream where I wanted the tail to be, inserted the straw or the skewer, and then placed on the tail. And then it's time to have a bit of fun and just decorate using whatever embellishments you've got. I use my buttercream to help me secure some of the seashells, just by placing a little bit on the back of them. I use some of my decorations to cover up any imperfections what I've got on my cake in the buttercream, or anything I didn't like, just filled up spaces what looks a little bit empty. It is just, again, all personal preference and having fun with it using whatever you've got. Because I had so much buttercream left over, I decided to add a border to the bottom of my cake. I think they're a really good way of making your cake look finished and neat. So gently just squeezing and pulling back on itself until you reach all the way around. I decided to decorate the front of the cake on the side and a little bit onto the cake board, and then added some of the silver balls to look like little bubbles maybe. And as you can see, I've got an imperfection on the side of my cake in the buttercream, so I decided to cover that up using the blue rock candy and just worked it all the way down so it looked like part of the design and not an actual cover up. And just have fun with it and keep on working until you're happy with your design on your cake. And there we have it, our elegant mermaid tail cake. I hope you enjoyed this video and thank you very much for watching.